This episode of The Business of Marketing is a little bit different. Instead of an interview with an industry expert, today I want to share with you a conversation we had internally at my agency, Content Monsta. Marc Raco, our head of content, and I talked about companies who are building content engines. We talk about what that means and how you as a marketer can frame your content needs in a way to help you obtain and save budget. So enjoy this behind the scenes conversation. Successful businesses know they have to be visible in the market to grow, and they're working harder to create content engines to make sure they show up before their competitors do. So how do you create a content engine that's built for your company? Well,
influential and thought-provoking minds in marketing, sales, and business. The Business of Marketing Podcast.
All right, so we've been looking through some of our recent content engines we've been building for companies, and the term content engine, I guess, came from we began with the repurposing idea, which we still do, but then we realized we expanded from that to talking about creating big content like the podcasts and the video. And I think things have kind of evolved to where people understand that you need to repurpose. That's kind of table stakes when you make content, but the strategy wasn't there. And we're seeing this evolve as we work with other clients as they build these content engines. And the biggest takeaway for me from where we're going is that people still tend to think writing when they think content. And we always thought, well, there's also media, there's, podcasts and video.
Yeah.
And the engine does supply that, right?
Well, I think also on that note, Lee, I think when people think about content, quite often they think about this polished, finished piece that may take a lot of bandwidth, resources, time and effort, frankly, to create. And then you have like this one output. There's your content, as opposed to thinking about, why don't you reverse engineer it and start with, like you said, a machine that you've built that it can constantly churn out lots of content in a leveraged, efficient way. And it's funny because you and I the other day, we were waffling between, do we call it a content engine or refer to it as a content engine or a visibility engine? Is it the content? Is it visibility? Or is it just, getting your message out?
Maybe it depends on who you're working with, because when we're working with executive-led content, it's definitely visibility. Like we have a few startups we work with. They're startups, they're new, they're not known in the market, and sometimes their founders already have a name in the industry. So the founder's visibility is important, and the founder can pull the agency or the company along with them. Or maybe they're responsible for letting their investors see that they're visible in the market.
Yeah.
And so that's a visibility engine.
Yeah.
And perhaps if you're more established already and you understand the value of content, but you're not making the right kinds or it's not getting spread far enough, then maybe it's a content engine.
Without getting too philosophical, I think a lot of it depends on what your mission is, not just even what your business is. For example, a lot of businesses for B2B podcasts, they think about the podcasts with a different mission. Some may be, I want to forge or build relationships. Others may be, I want to go for more brand recognition. Others are, I want to create a content machine to pump out as much content with as little effort on my part as I can as a business. It could be a wide range of those things or a combination. So if my goal is to create a lot of content to fill my content channels, maybe I need a content machine. If my goal is to get people to know about what we're doing and let people know about our brand and make those relationships, maybe it's a, quote, visibility machine. And then that's the focus on what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think I like engine either way, whether it's visibility engine or content engine, because it gives you a visual of you're taking this thing and putting it inside your strategy. I mean, because your strategy is the vehicle of where you're going. Not to be philosophical, but that's basically what it is. Repurposing is just doing stuff to multiply content, but having a strategy, having that vehicle to say, our goal is to reach this. Our goal is to take away some brand share in the market. Our goal is to make our founder more visible. Our goal is to launch this new product. And the engine to do that is this content, and you have a strategy of how you're going to use that content. So let's talk about some of the examples that we've built or we've seen in terms of building these content engines. And they start at different places, right?
Yeah, one that comes to mind is we're working with a client right now on an ongoing basis, and essentially they're sitting experts down for what effectively is an interview, but it's just that they have a series of predetermined questions, but they don't know what the answers are really going to be. And we record those sessions and we organize them so that the video looks nice, the audio sounds good, it looks real professional, but it's a really extemporaneous, organic discussion in a way. And sometimes we even throw in additional questions or ask them to summarize in their own words. And sometimes that's the greatest content, right? And then we say, okay, now we've captured this. What can we do with it? Maybe we can integrate it into a larger video that's got B-roll and animation or text, or it's a really polished piece. Or we might take pieces of it and put it out as social shorts. But my point is they are using it for a lot of different missions: recruitment, brand building, education, internal marketing. And they could literally use the same recording and build different pieces that are aimed with a different message from exactly that same recording. And that's a great way to think about it too. Like if I had those 3 or 4 missions as a business, could I assemble, let me grab a couple of clients, let me grab a couple of industry experts, let me grab a couple of people within our company, let me whoever I assemble, ask them all a bunch of questions. I have all this raw material, all this clay. Now I can make a lot of content out of that. I could make a lot of social shorts depending on what message of the day I want to get out there. I've got a lot of material to pull from depending on whose opinion I want to share, or if I want a combination of clients, experts, thought leaders, employees, whatever, I can put that together. So the point is, it all started with the most basic, fairly low lift thing, which is just to have a conversation and memorialize it, to record it and record it well.
If you're a marketer struggling to create content that's truly unique to your brand, here's the key. Your experts and executives are your most valuable content assets. Conversational content like videos and podcasts featuring your team stand out above all other content. So instead of creating content that sounds just like your competition, start leveraging the unique voices inside your company. Thought leaders and authentic conversations build credibility and engagement. At Content Monsta, we specialize in remote content production, meaning we coach your people to be comfortable on camera, then we capture and produce high-quality videos and podcasts featuring your team and customers. No need for expensive production crews, long production plans, or complex setups. Want to see how it works? Visit contentmonsta.com today to learn more. You mentioned raw material. I wanted to talk about that because I think the raw material, what you name the raw material, I'm talking to you marketers, what you name the raw material often pigeonholes how you get funding to do that thing, because there's always a thought of what that thing looks like. And when we talk to clients, when we first start out, we almost always change the conversation as we hear what they're saying to help them figure out what it is you actually want to do, because the raw material can start as what you think is a podcast, what you think is a customer testimonial, what you think is an interview. But the thing is, and I know this from my days, in corporate, what you call that thing when you go to ask for budget can change whether you get the budget or not.
Yeah.
Like if you say, hey, I want to do a podcast series that connotates a commitment, it connotates time and doing things over and over, which is great. But depending on how you're trying to sell this,
absolutely,
you have to figure out, okay, what do you really want from it? Sometimes it's just a matter of, we want to do a series of interviews. We want to interview these 5 executives. We know, the marketer knows, their goal is to interview 5 executives and to get their opinions. That in that case, the raw material isn't really a podcast. It is a series of interviews. Or it may be a matter of, we have an organization, I think they're interviewing, we do a lot of client testimonials, for example. And some of those client testimonials actually end up being clips for the website that are more industry information than they are testimonials. So again, as a marketer, I would be careful what I call that raw material because it has some preconceptions of what that means in terms of workload and cost and the whole process.
And your conception as a marketer may not be the same as your stakeholder that's going to agree to fund this.
Right.
You have different experiences in life. You're coming from a different point in your industry. You may be of different even generation and thinking
Yeah.
about it differently. As you were talking, Lee, this is what was coming to my head. You mentioned sales, meaning the marketer selling their own company on investing in content that's needed to market and ultimately sell.
Right.
So that's a sales process. And what's a thing that we have to always keep in mind? So this is useful advice to any marketer out there, I think, as they try to get the assets made that they know they need to do their marketing well. You are
Mhm.
selling your leadership on the bandwidth, the room, the resources, and the budget to execute these, and frankly, the trust in going forward with these and putting these as an extension of the brand's message, right? All these are true. You have to sell them. What is a basic element of any sales process? You have to talk about benefits, not features. So as you're
Mhm.
selling the idea of a project, you can't sell unless the leadership came to you and said, by gum, we need a podcast. Everyone's got a podcast. We don't want one. Make sure we have one. That's a horse of a different color, right? But if you know that the goal is we need to capture more of our leadership doing thought leadership out in the world, and we have to show that we are experts in this topic. How do we do that? Maybe a podcast
Mhm.
is one of the ways that you do that, and maybe a podcast is going to be a byproduct of a series of recordings you decide to do you're creating a content engine, right?
Mhm.
But maybe where you have to start is that result, that benefit. It's not about what the thing is, it's about where you want to go. And you say, well, if we, using my example earlier, do a series of recordings with a bunch of these specific targeted people or minds or leaders, we will have that raw material to make things that can get our brand image out there, because that's one of our benefits. That's one of our goals. We can have an ongoing regular cadence of communication that fills our content channels. That's another result, a benefit. But the feature, the product that you're selling is really just the process to assemble all this and execute that. But
Mhm.
the benefit is what it will do for the business. And we have to stop selling, I want a budget to make a podcast. I want a budget to make a marketing
Yeah.
video. We have to think more about, I want the process, however the tools
Yeah.
assemble
It's about how you
themselves,
frame it. Like if
how
you're
you
trying to
frame
sell
it.
it internally, you want to frame it as here are the benefits. Because if I were right
Yeah.
now in corporate and I want to obtain a certain amount of video, for example, like we know we need video for our websites, for social, for YouTube, whatever. I would frame it as I'm going to obtain video of our experts, video of our leaders, video of you, Mr. CEO, CFO, video of our technologists, video of our customers. Not necessarily getting into the weeds of how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to say,
Yeah.
look, I've worked with a company who can help me build a content
Yep.
engine. And for X amount of dollars, we can get these benefits from it. That will get you a lot further
100%.
than trying to describe the clay that already has a preconceived visual to that person. If you say, for example, we've seen this lots of times, I want to create 10 videos. Oh my God, they see dollar signs, right? If you say, I want to create a podcast, they see long term commitment. There's a lot of things they're going to think in their mind.
Yeah.
And unless that boss says, I want a podcast or I want a video, back up a little bit and frame it the way based, like you said,
Yeah.
based on the benefits.
Two clients come to mind that fit perfectly in this to me. One is someone who came to us and said, we want to create a fairly large number of clips each month. Let's call it maybe 10 clips a month. Maybe that's not large, but a number of them on an ongoing basis. And we want to talk about all aspects of the business that we're in. They're in a hospitality related business. And they did not have in mind at all to do a podcast. That was not their goal at all. They wanted a whole bunch of clips, but they don't have the time to do a separate shoot for each one of these separate clips. It's just not like practical for them. So we're like, well, why don't we just have once a month a recording session, and you can talk about everything you need to, and we'll take that long form video and we'll put it out to the world, and we'll take a shorter version of it and put it out to the world of an extended conversation from within that larger conversation. And then we'll dice it all up into 10 pieces of branded, captioned material that touches on a whole bunch of different topics you've covered. And then you can put that out through your social media channels and LinkedIn and everything else you do. And ultimately they were like, sold. Oh, by the way, that long form video, we'll make an audio version of it. That'll go through traditional podcast channels. Now you have a podcast without any extra cost or any extra lift on your part. And the video is going to be on YouTube, and it'll be a video podcast. So it'll be a show. It's like you have your own talk show. All you did was two people sitting talking about what you do in your business once a month, and we handle it. That is their content engine. Okay, that's one example. The other is one we recently talked with, who we're going to start working with, who again did not come to us with a podcast in mind at all. They came and said, I need to create more content for our content channels. We work with an agency who does all of our social media stuff, but I don't have enough material to give them. And I don't have a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of budget, but I'm paying a lot for social media amplification. I ought to have some material to put in it. And, what they wanted to do is tell the stories of the people that they're helping and working with, and the way they go about it, and the kind of attitude and approach that they take. And again, similarly, a podcast was really sort of the answer, but it was about the benefit. What did they need to do? Minimal lift, minimal time spent, have conversations, capture those conversations, and then create derivative content from those conversations, a bunch of social media, long form content, shorter form content, and then everything else that can be extracted from that, from the transcripts. They can make articles. But the point is all they have to do is sit down a couple times a month for half hour, an hour, and we do the rest, and they have this content machine running.
Hey marketers, imagine harnessing the power of conversations to elevate your brand's authority and visibility. With Content Monsta's podcast production services, you create a platform to connect with executives and subject matter experts, fostering relationships that position your brand as a thought leader. Our expert team collaborates with you to craft engaging podcasts, which can be repurposed into videos and social media content, maximizing your reach across platforms. Don't let content creation challenges hold you back. Partner with Content Monsta to transform your marketing strategy and reach more customers. Visit contentmonsta.com today to get started. I think that's the biggest takeaway for a content engine is that it almost never fails. A client comes to us and they have one particular kind of content in mind. Now, they could use others, but they hadn't thought about them yet. And so they say, I want a video, I want a podcast. And what we show them is that you can get a lot more than you thought of. In fact, let me just give you what I call this, like the evolution of content repurposing. I did a keynote a few years back called the Content Remix that kind of started some of this. But here's our philosophy on this and how I see it and how we do for our own content. Like God knows where this video we're creating right now will end up in terms of types of content. So let's say you mentioned a client who started out with, they thought they wanted just to do some video, right? You have a couple of video conversations a month. So that leaves you a long form video. You can make short videos out of that. And I don't mean shorts. I mean like 3 to 5 minute videos. If you have a 30-minute conversation, then now that 30-minute conversation also could spawn several 5-minute conversations, 5-minute one topic solved for your customer videos that goes on YouTube as well. I've got some excerpts, 5-minute excerpts that did as well or got more views than the long form and vice versa. So that's a part we often forget is the middle ground between long form and shorts. Then you also have your shorts, which you can spread across channels, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram. Then you've had a natural conversation with an expert that knows things deeper than perhaps a marketer or a writer who's not in your space knows. Transcribe that conversation, write an article from the conversation. AI can help synthesize that. If you understand, if your AI knows the voice of your company, they can take the voice of your company, lay it over the transcript, and synthesize an article that is perfectly in your voice with new terminology, natural terminology, expert terminology that's both good for SEO and for generative search. So what have I named here? So far, we got the long form, mid form, short form. The podcast. You already had the conversation, right? So I think as we're talking now, this conversation may end up being an episode of my podcast, The Business of Marketing. So we'll repurpose this for that too, which I hadn't thought about until we began talking.
There we go.
So now you have a podcast, which is, like you said earlier, no additional lift.
That's just the content outputs.
Mhm.
We haven't even talked about the ancillary other aspects of that engine existing and the other things that it does. It may it may sort of force you into a cadence that you otherwise wouldn't do in terms of output.
That's important. In fact, when someone names podcast, that's, I think, what we've seen is one of the strongest reasons to even go the podcast route. Because if you're able to keep a regular cadence, it forces you to do so. It forces you to say, we committed to 2 episodes a month. And it really could just be we committed to sitting down and having a conversation 2 times a month. And that keeps the engine going.
I don't think this is something we say often enough. You know, one of the reasons why leadership may not commit to going forward with that regular cadence like a podcast is because they perceive they don't have the time. They can't work it in their schedule. I can't promise I can be available twice a month to do this. And I understand they're busy. But the other thing I think about is that person invariably is always meeting with other leaders. They're always meeting with clients. They're always meeting with prospects. They always have things that is important for them to say out in the world. Okay. But these conversations, these recordings can just be, instead of private, they can be on mic. And quite frankly, if you go to your client or a person in the industry that you're going to have a meeting with anyway and say, you know what, I know we're going to meet and talk about this. I think this would be a wonderful thing to share with people. Would you be willing to have that on microphone with me? Because I'd like to share that with our audience.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, most people, not everybody, most people will jump at that chance because that's a free opportunity for them to amplify their own business or their own thought leadership, and you're doing all the lift. And then you are having a conversation you'd have anyway, but you're going to get a lot more value out of that. And if that conversation, by the way, doesn't have the results that you want it to, it doesn't end up in a sale, it doesn't move the needle for you, the conversation still exists and can fill your content channels and provide value in another way. So having that cadence is manageable if you think a little outside the box about how it's not like I have my regular schedule and I have to add this thing on. It's how does this fit within the thing I'm doing anyway? I'm just going to record some of them.
Yeah. We know, on that note, the reason we have this video that you're watching now, the reason it exists is because Mark and I realized we would have these debrief calls after talking to a customer or during a project, and we would talk for 30 minutes and go, wow, that was valuable for someone else to hear, for a customer to hear. I remember recording that. And so the value we hope you got in watching this video came from the fact that we have these great conversations internally within Content Monsta. And it's a value to someone, to our listeners, or to whoever's watching this video, to you watching the video. So that's an example of what Mark just said. Just record things you're already doing, and it will help bring your customers closer to you.
And as an add-on to that quickly, I want to say, content engine can be a structured thing. it can be a structured thing where it's a podcast, and you work with our team, and we have a structure into it, and then here are the outputs of it. But it is a matter of having an engine going one way or another. Lee, you've talked in the past about recording your end of a sales call, for example, and then whether or not that results in a sale, that still made your time valuable, because you never know when a golden nugget's going to come out of your mouth, and you will have captured it, and you say, that is the best way I ever explained that, and people should hear that, and I captured it. I'm going to take that. The person I talked to is not on the recording, so it's not like I'm violating their privacy or that relationship. I've captured that. That's a piece of content. The point is to start the content engine, whatever it is. Now, the more structured and strategic it can be in its design, probably the more effective it'll ultimately be. But the main thing is stick the key in the ignition and turn it.
There you go. Well, that's mic drop. For any marketer watching this, I think my last word would be that, and frame what you're trying to create internally, your content engine. Think about how you frame it first, what your total output you want to be before you go ask for the budget. Understand what your outputs are going to be and frame it carefully. And it's going to be so easy to frame it in a way that says, wow, we're going to get all that for this small price, and we're going to be committed to being regular with this. Here's the money. Take the corporate wallet. I mean, it'll be easy. And this is coming from someone who had to ask for that money a lot. I wish I had known that then, to just frame it better in how we create content. So this is Mark and I having our conversations. We're creating content. We're eating our own dog food, as they say, because we know that what we talk about is valuable to you. So subscribe to the channel and learn with us.
Thank you for listening to the Business of Marketing podcast, a show brought to you by ContentMonsta.com, the producer of B2B digital marketing content. Show notes can be found on ContentMonsta.com, as well as aleejudge.com.